The text from my brother Marcus came through while I was sitting in my small studio apartment, working on what he would have called another worthless doodle. The afternoon light streamed through the single window, illuminating canvases that lined every wall, paintings that my family had dismissed as hobby projects from their struggling artist sister. Sold your amateur paintings for $50 each. You're welcome, Marcus had written, followed by a smug emoji. Found them in Mom's garage when we were cleaning out her stuff. At least now they're not taking up space. I stared at the message for a long moment, my coffee growing cold in my hands. Those paintings, 5 pieces I'd stored at Mom's house during my experimental phase, 3 years ago, weren't just random artwork. They were early pieces from my Meridian series, created under my pseudonym M. Sterling. Each canvas represented months of work, layers of meaning, and techniques that had taken me years to perfect. Thank you for letting me know, I replied, keeping my response neutral. His response came immediately. Aren't you mad? I thought you'd be upset about me getting rid of your stuff without asking. I wasn't mad. I was fascinated. Because those amateur paintings were worth approximately $12 million each on the current art market. And the buyers? Well, the buyers were actually my own art dealers, working under strict instructions to acquire any M. Sterling pieces that appeared on the secondary market. My phone rang. It was Marcus, probably expecting me to break down crying about my lost artwork. Hey Sophie, he said, his voice carrying that particular tone of forced sympathy he used when he thought he was delivering bad news. Look, I know you're probably upset about the paintings, but honestly $50 each was pretty good for amateur work. The guy at the estate sale said most people were offering $20. Estate sale? I asked, genuinely curious about how this had unfolded. Yeah, you know how Mom had all that junk in her garage. Dad and I decided to just clear everything out and sell it. There were boxes of your old art supplies, some canvases, and those 5 paintings you left there. I figured they were just taking up space and Dad needed the money from the sale anyway. Dad needed the money. That was rich. My father, Robert Chin, had been living off the success of his small accounting firm for the past 15 years, constantly reminding the family about his financial expertise and business acumen. He'd spent years lecturing me about the impracticality of art as a career, suggesting I pursue something stable, like accounting or business management. Who bought them? I asked. Some art dealer from the city. Really nice guy actually. He said he specialized in emerging artists and thought the paintings showed potential. His words, not mine. He even left his card in case you wanted to connect with him about your future work. I almost laughed. The art dealer was undoubtedly Harrison Mitchell from Mitchell & Associates, one of the most prestigious galleries in the country. Harrison had been representing my work under the M. Sterling pseudonym for the past 4 years, helping me build a reputation in the contemporary art world while I maintain my cover as the family's struggling artist. That was thoughtful of him, I said. Yeah, and Sophie? Don't take this the wrong way, but maybe this is a sign that you should consider a more practical career path. I mean, if a professional art dealer thinks $50 is fair for your work, maybe it's time to be realistic about your prospects. Marcus had always been the golden child. The successful one with the MBA, the management position at a mid-level marketing firm, the suburban house with the 2-car garage. He'd married his college girlfriend, Jessica, and they'd produced 2 perfectly average children who attended private school and played soccer on weekends. He'd also been slowly going broke for the past 18 months, though he'd never admit it to the family. His marketing firm had lost 3 major clients, his mortgage was underwater, and Jessica's spending habits had pushed their credit card debt well into 6 figures. But Marcus maintained the facade of success just like the rest of my family. I appreciate the advice, I said, meaning it more than he could possibly understand. Also, Dad wanted me to ask if you needed money for rent this month. I know things have been tight for you and we don't want you to end up homeless or anything. The concern in his voice was genuine, which made it both touching and infuriating. They saw my small apartment, my second-hand furniture, my modest lifestyle, and assumed I was barely surviving. They had no idea that the struggling artist persona was carefully maintained to protect something much larger. I should be okay, I said. But thank you for thinking of me. After ending the call, I walked to my computer and pulled up the secure portal that connected me to my real life. The one my family knew nothing about. Sterling's latest exhibition at the Whitmore Gallery had sold out within 3 hours of opening, with individual pieces selling for between $8 and $15 million. The art world had been buzzing about the mysterious artist who refused all interviews and public appearances, creating a mystique that only drove prices higher. My phone buzzed with a text from Harrison. Acquired 5 early Meridian pieces at estate sale. Family had no idea of value. All 5 now secured in climate-controlled storage. Shall we discuss authentication and potential exhibition inclusion? I smiled and typed back. Family thinks they sold them for $50 each to help with garage sale. Let's keep it that way for now. Harrison's response was immediate. Understood. Your secret is safe. These pieces could anchor the retrospective we discussed. The retrospective. Harrison had been pushing me to consider a major solo exhibition that would cement M. Sterling's place in contemporary art history. We were talking about a career-defining show that could push individual piece values above $20 million. But a retrospective would require more public attention, more scrutiny, and potentially more risk of my identity being discovered. My family's ignorance had become my greatest protection. They dismissed my work so completely that they never bothered to research contemporary art trends, never noticed that M. Sterling's pieces bore striking similarities to the amateur doodles I created in my spare time, never connected the dots between my artistic techniques and the work that was revolutionizing galleries across the country. The next day I decided to visit Dad. He lived in the same suburban house where I'd grown up, surrounded by the relics of middle-class achievement, family photos documenting graduations and promotions, awards from local business organizations, furniture that had been expensive 20 years ago but now looked dated and worn. Sophie, Dad said, opening the door with the forced enthusiasm he reserved for visits from his troubled youngest daughter. Marcus said he talked to you about the garage sale. I hope you're not upset about the paintings. Not at all, I said, settling into the same couch where I'd once announced my intention to study art in college, a declaration that had prompted a 2-hour lecture about financial responsibility and career prospects. Good. Marcus was worried you might be hurt that we didn't ask first, but honestly, Sophie, those paintings were just taking up space. And $50 each was more than I expected, given. He trailed off, probably realizing that finishing the sentence would require him to articulate exactly what he thought of my artistic abilities. Given that they were amateur work? I supplied helpfully. Dad had the grace to look slightly embarrassed. Well, I just meant that the art market is incredibly competitive. Even talented artists struggle to make a living. I've always worried about your financial stability. I understand, I said. And I appreciate that you and Marcus were looking out for me. Actually, that's something I wanted to discuss with you. This garage sale made me realize how precarious your situation might be. Marcus and I have been talking and we think it might be time for you to consider a career change. Here it came. The intervention I'd been expecting for years. I've spoken to some clients who run businesses in the area. There are opportunities in administrative work, customer service, even entry-level accounting if you're willing to learn. You're still young enough to start over in a practical field. Dad pulled out a folder filled with printouts, job listings, career guides, articles about adults transitioning to new professions. He'd clearly spent considerable time preparing this presentation. I know it's not what you dreamed of, he continued, but dreams don't pay rent. And frankly, Sophie, the art world is brutal. If you're only getting $50 for paintings that took you months to create, the math just doesn't work. I looked at the job listings spread across the coffee table. Customer service representative, $32,000 annually. Administrative assistant, $28,000 with benefits. Entry-level bookkeeper, $35,000 to start. My last painting had sold for $14.2 million. These look like good opportunities, I said, genuinely appreciating the effort he'd put into researching options. Can I think about it? Of course. But Sophie, don't wait too long. The longer you stay in this artistic fantasy, the harder it becomes to transition to the real world. The real world. If only he knew that I was currently negotiating with 3 different museums for permanent installations, that my work was being studied in graduate-level art theory courses, that collectors from 12 countries had pieces on waiting lists. After leaving Dad's house, I drove to my real studio. Not the small apartment where I maintain my cover, but a 5,000 square foot warehouse space in the industrial district. The building looked unremarkable from the outside, just another converted factory among dozens of similar structures. But inside, it was a cathedral of creativity. Natural light flooded in through massive skylights, illuminating canvases that stretched 12 feet in height. Professional-grade easels held works in progress, each piece representing months of conceptual development and technical execution. The air smelled of oil paint and possibility. This was where Sterling really lived. I pulled out my phone and called Harrison. "I've been thinking about your retrospective proposal," I said, running my hand along the edge of a canvas that would likely sell for $20 million when completed. "And my family just sold 5 of my early pieces for $50 each. They have no idea what they're actually worth. If I do this retrospective, if Sterling steps into the full spotlight, there's a chance they'll eventually make the connection." Harrison was quiet for a moment. "Are you concerned about their reaction?" "I'm concerned about losing the protection that their ignorance provides. Right now they're so convinced of my failure that they don't look closely at anything I do. That invisibility has been invaluable. But it's also limiting your growth as an artist and your impact on the contemporary art world. Sterling's work deserves to be seen, studied, and celebrated. You're not just creating beautiful objects, you're advancing important conversations about identity, society, and the human experience." He was right, of course. My work under the Sterling pseudonym had tackled subjects that mattered. Economic inequality, environmental destruction, the psychology of modern isolation. The paintings weren't just aesthetically successful, they were culturally significant. What if we structured the retrospective to maintain the mystery? I suggested. No artist appearances, no interviews, just the work itself. We could even play up the anonymous aspect. Make it part of the artistic statement. A phantom retrospective, Harrison mused. Actually, that could be even more powerful. The absence of the artist becomes part of the commentary on celebrity culture and artistic commodification. We talked for another hour, developing a concept that would allow Sterling to have the career-defining exhibition while keeping Sophie Chin safely invisible. It was a delicate balance, but one that could work if executed carefully. That evening Marcus called again. "Hey Sophie, I've been thinking about our conversation yesterday. Jessica and I talked, and we want you to know that if you need help transitioning to a new career, we're here for you. We could even help with a loan for professional training or certification programs." The offer was genuinely kind, which made it simultaneously heartwarming and heartbreaking. Marcus was offering to go further into debt to help his struggling sister, not knowing that his financial situation was far more precarious than mine. "That's incredibly generous," I said. "But Marcus, are you sure you're in a position to help right now? I know things have been challenging with the marketing firm." There was a long pause. "What do you mean?" "I just meant that the economy has been tough on everyone. I wouldn't want you to overextend yourself trying to help me." "Sophie, I'm doing fine. The business is solid, Jessica and I are comfortable, and we can afford to help family when needed. That's what successful people do. We look out for those who are struggling." His defensiveness told me everything I needed to know about how close to the edge he really was. Marcus had built his identity around being the successful sibling, the one who'd made smart choices and achieved financial stability. Admitting to problems would require dismantling that entire self-concept. "I appreciate that," I said. "But I think I'm going to be okay." "Sophie, listen to me. I know you don't want to give up on your dreams, but at some point you have to face reality. You're 32 years old, you're living in a tiny apartment, you're barely making ends meet, and now you've lost 5 paintings that represented months of work. This pattern can't continue indefinitely." 32 years old. In the art world, I was practically a prodigy. Most artists didn't achieve significant commercial success until their 40s or 50s, if ever. Sterling had broken into the highest levels of the market by age 30, a feat that art critics called unprecedented and revolutionary. "You're right that patterns can't continue indefinitely," I said. 3 weeks later, the Whitmore Gallery announced the upcoming Sterling retrospective, Invisible Truths, 5 Years of Vision. The art world went into a frenzy. Collectors, critics, and museums began jockeying for access to the exhibition and the rare opportunity to acquire pieces from the mysterious artist's complete catalog. The announcement made international news. Art publications ran features speculating about M. Sterling's identity, their influences, their future plans. The mystique around the anonymous artist had reached fever pitch, with some critics comparing the cultural phenomenon to Banksy's anonymous street art movement. My family remained completely oblivious. Dad called the day after the announcement to update me on potential job opportunities. Marcus texted about a customer service position at his friend's company. Jessica sent me links to online certification programs for administrative professionals. They were so focused on fixing my failed life that they never looked beyond their assumptions to see what was actually happening around them. The retrospective opened on a Thursday evening in October. I stood across the street from the Whitmore Gallery, wearing jeans and a simple sweater, watching as art collectors, museum directors, and cultural influencers arrived in expensive cars and designer outfits. These were people who could afford to spend millions on a single painting, gathering to celebrate work that I'd created in my warehouse studio while my family worried about my ability to pay rent. Harrison had texted me throughout the day with updates. Opening night sold 3 pieces within first hour. Museum acquisition offers coming in for major works. Critics calling it the most important contemporary exhibition in a decade. My phone rang. It was Marcus. "Sophie, where are you? I tried calling earlier." "Just out running errands," I said, which was technically true. I was running the errand of watching my career-defining exhibition open to unprecedented acclaim. "Good. Listen, I have some news that might cheer you up. Remember that art dealer who bought your paintings at the garage sale? He called Dad today." My heart skipped. "Really?" "Yeah, apparently he's been doing some research and he thinks your work might have more potential than he initially realized. He wants to meet with you about representing some of your newer pieces." Harrison was playing his role perfectly. We discussed this approach. A gradual introduction that would allow me to start sharing more of my success with my family without revealing the full extent of the M. Sterling empire. "He mentioned that the contemporary art market is really hot right now," Marcus continued, "and that artists with your particular style are finding new audiences. He thinks you could maybe sell pieces for a few $100s each if you develop the right relationships." A few $100s. The painting that had just sold at the opening was purchased by the Getty Museum for $18.7 million. "That sounds promising," I said. "It is. Sophie, this could be the break you've been waiting for. If you could make even $500 per painting and do maybe 1 painting per month, that's $6,000 a year in extra income. Combined with a regular job, you could actually achieve some financial stability. $6,000 a year. Sterling's work had generated over $200 million in sales during the past 4 years. "I'll definitely follow up with him," I said. "You should. And Sophie? I'm proud of you for being open to new possibilities. I know it's hard to let go of big dreams, but sometimes scaling back our expectations is the first step toward real success." After ending the call, I walked into the gallery. The space was packed with people examining my work, discussing the technical mastery, the conceptual depth, the cultural significance. I moved through the crowd anonymously, listening to conversations about the mysterious M. Sterling and their revolutionary impact on contemporary art. "The brushwork in this piece is extraordinary," a woman was saying to her companion as they stood before one of my recent paintings. "Whoever M. Sterling is, they're working at a level that most artists never reach." "I heard the Tate Modern is negotiating for 3 pieces, another person mentioned. "This retrospective is going to cement M. Sterling's place in art history." Near the back of the gallery, I found the 5 paintings that Marcus had sold for $50 each. They were displayed with special lighting and detailed placards explaining their significance in M. Sterling's artistic development. A small crowd had gathered around them, with one collector explaining to his friends how these early works showed the seeds of the artistic vision that had revolutionized contemporary painting. "These 5 pieces alone are valued at approximately $60 million, the collector was saying. "They represent a crucial transitional period in M. Sterling's evolution as an artist." $60 million. Marcus thought he'd helped me by getting $50 each for them at a garage sale. Harrison appeared beside me, professionally dressed and playing his role as the gallery director. "Magnificent turnout," he said quietly, as if we were strangers who'd struck up a conversation. "M. Sterling's work always draws incredible interest." "It's remarkable," I replied, maintaining the charade. I've never seen paintings that combine technical skill with such powerful conceptual frameworks. The artist's anonymity adds another layer of meaning, don't you think? In a culture obsessed with celebrity, Sterling forces us to focus purely on the work itself. We chatted for a few more minutes, then Harrison moved on to other guests, leaving me alone with my secret and my success. My phone buzzed with a text from Dad. "Hope you're having a good evening, sweetheart. Remember to follow up with that art dealer Marcus mentioned. Even small opportunities can lead to bigger things." 2 months later, I was sitting in the same suburban living room where Dad had once lectured me about career practicality, listening to him read aloud from an article in Art News about the continued success of the Sterling retrospective. "Listen to this," Dad said, adjusting his reading glasses. "It says here that this Sterling person has completely transformed the contemporary art market. Individual paintings are selling for over $20 million. Can you imagine?" "It's incredible," I agreed. "The article says Sterling is probably the most successful anonymous artist in history. No one knows who they are, but their work is hanging in major museums around the world." Marcus nodded from his spot on the couch. "It makes you think about the art world differently. I mean, somewhere out there is this person making millions of dollars from painting, and nobody even knows their real name. It also makes you realize how competitive the field really is," Dad added, looking at me with the gentle concern he reserved for discussions of my future. "An artist at that level probably has decades of training, international connections, representation by the most prestigious galleries. It's not something someone can just stumble into." He was trying to be kind, to manage my expectations without crushing my dreams entirely. Dad genuinely believed he was protecting me from disappointment by helping me understand the realities of the art world. "Sophie," Marcus said, "did you ever follow up with that dealer who bought your paintings? He seemed really interested in working with you." "I did," I said. "We've had some good conversations about possibilities." "That's great. Even if you never reach Sterling's level, there's still value in pursuing art as a side income while building a stable career foundation." "Actually," I said, "I have some news about that." Both Dad and Marcus looked at me expectantly. "The dealer has been showing my work to some collectors, and there's been more interest than expected. I've sold several pieces over the past few months." "That's wonderful," Dad said, his face lighting up with genuine pride. "How much were you able to get for them?" "Enough that I think I can focus on art full-time for a while." Marcus leaned forward. "Sophie, that's fantastic, but be careful not to get carried away. Even if you sold a few pieces for a few $100s each, that's not sustainable income. You still need to think about health insurance, retirement savings, all the practical considerations." "I understand," I said. "But I think I'm going to be okay." "Well, we're proud of you for finding some success," Dad said. "And remember, even if the art thing doesn't work out long-term, you'll always have our support." 6 months later, I made a decision that would change everything. I was standing in my warehouse studio, looking at a new series of paintings that Harrison believed could be my most important work yet. The pieces explored themes of identity, family, and the masks we wear to protect ourselves from those who claim to love us. They were deeply personal, informed by years of hiding my success from the people who mattered most to me. I picked up my phone and called Harrison. "I want to do something different for these new pieces," I said. "What did you have in mind?" "I want to sign them with my real name. Sophie Chen." There was a long pause. "Are you sure? That would essentially reveal Sterling's identity to anyone who's been paying attention to your family situation." "I think it's time," I said. "My family loves me, but they've never really seen me. Maybe it's time to give them the chance. This could change everything. Your privacy, your family relationships, your entire life structure." "I know," I said. "But I'm tired of being invisible to the people who matter most." The new exhibition opened 3 months later at the Museum of Contemporary Art. The announcement that Sterling and Sophie Chen were the same person sent shockwaves through the art world and made international headlines. The mysterious artist who had revolutionized contemporary painting was revealed to be a young woman whose family had been selling her work at garage sales. The story became a cultural phenomenon. Articles about hidden genius, family dynamics, and the nature of artistic recognition. My phone rang constantly with interview requests from major media outlets. But the call I was waiting for came on a Tuesday afternoon. Sophie. It was Marcus, his voice confused and hesitant. I just saw the news. Is this real? It's real, I said. But how? When? I don't understand. Those paintings I sold for $50 were worth about $12 million each. The buyers were my art dealers, working under instructions to acquire any of my pieces that appeared on the secondary market. The silence stretched for nearly a minute. Sophie, I need to see you. We all need to see you. Can you come over to Dad's house? An hour later, I was sitting in that same suburban living room, but everything felt different. Dad and Marcus looked at me like they were seeing a stranger. Which, in many ways, they were. I don't know how to process this, Dad said finally. All these years we thought you were struggling, that you needed our help and guidance. But you were one of the most successful artists in the world. I was protecting something I'd built, I said. Your assumptions about my failure became my camouflage. Marcus was staring at his hands. I sold $60 million worth of art for $250 total. The art dealers were acting on my instructions, I said gently. I wanted to make sure those pieces were recovered safely. But why didn't you tell us? Dad asked. Why let us worry about you, offer you money we couldn't afford, try to convince you to give up on your dreams? Because you never asked what I was actually doing. You saw what you expected to see, the struggling youngest child who needed guidance and protection. We were trying to help, Marcus said, his voice small. I know, and your intentions came from love. But your help was based on assumptions, not reality. We talked for hours that day, unraveling years of misunderstanding and rebuilding our relationships on a foundation of truth. It was painful and healing and necessary. Dad looked at me with a mixture of pride and regret. I spent so many years trying to protect you from disappointment in the art world. I never imagined you'd already conquered it. You were protecting the daughter you thought you knew, I said. Now you have the chance to know the daughter who actually exists. Marcus was scrolling through articles about my success on his phone. It says here that your work is in the permanent collections of 12 major museums. That you've revolutionized contemporary painting. That critics compare you to the most important artists of the century. That's all true, I said. And we missed it completely. You missed it because you weren't looking for it. You were so convinced I was failing that you never considered I might be succeeding. 6 months later, my family attended the opening of my latest exhibition. This time as proud relatives rather than concerned interventionists. Dad wore a suit he'd bought specifically for the occasion, and Marcus had spent weeks reading art magazines to prepare for conversations with collectors and critics. As we stood together in the gallery, surrounded by paintings that had been created in secret and revealed in truth, Dad put his arm around my shoulders. I'm sorry it took us so long to really see you, he said. You're seeing me now, I replied. That's what matters. Marcus was explaining to a journalist how proud he was of his sister's success, carefully avoiding any mention of the garage sale incident that had become art world legend. My family had spent years telling me what my work was worth. $50 per painting at best. They'd never bothered to discover what I'd actually built. Now they knew the difference between assumptions and reality. And so did I.